The hospital room was still, but inside I was crumbling. My chest felt hollow as I stared at the message on my phone. Lily really needs me right now. Her grandma passed away. I'll come by later. You just need rest anyway, right? It's just anemia. Just anemia. My fingers clenched around the phone until my knuckles turned white. I reread his words over and over, hoping that maybe I'd misunderstood, that maybe I was imagining the indifference laced in them. But no. His words were clear. My condition was insignificant compared to Lily's loss. Tears blurred my vision. It wasn't just the words, it was the weight behind them. He chose to be with her. Lily had always been a presence in our relationship, like a shadow lurking just out of sight. His first love. The one who got away. I tried to trust him, tried to believe that I wasn't competing with a memory. But now here I was alone in a hospital bed while he held her hand. I bit down on my lip hard enough to draw blood, the pain grounding me. He didn't know the truth. My truth. He thought I had anemia. That a little rest and iron supplements would fix everything. But I didn't have anemia. I had leukemia. And there was no fixing this. I hadn't told him yet. Not because I wanted to lie, but because I wanted to protect him at least for as long as I can. His startup was on the brink of success, and I couldn't bear to be the reason he lost everything he'd worked for. So I said nothing. I suffered in silence. And now he was with Lily, offering her the comfort I so desperately needed. I found myself laughable, and there is no point of telling him about it anymore. The tears came fast and hard. My heart ached in a way I hadn't known was possible. I felt abandoned, forgotten, like my life was fading and no one noticed. He didn't notice. With trembling hands I packed my things. I wouldn't stay here waiting for someone who had already chosen someone else. I left a note for the nurses and walked out of the hospital, my legs weak but my resolve stronger than ever. I caught the first train back to my hometown, the familiar sights blurring through my tears. As the train rocked gently, I pulled out my phone one last time and blocked his number. The first few days back home were numb. I moved through them like a ghost, existing but not living. Then one morning I woke up with a thought, a list. If my time was limited, I was going to make it count. No more waiting. No more tears for Oliver. Watch all the Harry Potter movies back to back. Try super spicy Cajun seafood. Feel the ocean breeze on my face. I immersed myself in these small joys. The movies brought a sense of childhood wonder. The spicy seafood made my eyes water and my heart race, and the ocean breeze reminded me of what it felt like to be free. Each item crossed off the list was a victory, a moment reclaimed. When Oliver's phone buzzed with a call from the hospital, he nearly ignored it. He was still sitting on Lily's couch as she spoke softly about her grandmother. He told himself he was doing the right thing, being there for her in her grief. But something gnawed at him, a whisper in the back of his mind that he couldn't shake. He glanced at his phone. Hospital flashed on the screen. His heart tightened. "Excuse me for a second," he muttered, rising from the couch. Lily gave him a small, understanding nod. "Take your time." He stepped into the hallway and answered the call. "Hello. Mr. Oliver Evans?" the voice on the other end asked, calm but professional. "Yes, this is Oliver. This is Nurse Kim from St. Mary's Hospital. I'm calling to inform you that Mia Adams checked herself out earlier today against medical advice. We were concerned since she left suddenly and didn't appear well. Oliver felt the blood drain from his face. What do you mean she checked herself out? She's supposed to be resting. She has anemia, right? There was a pause on the other end. Mr. Evans, I'm not at liberty to discuss her medical details, but I strongly suggest you contact her immediately. This isn't something she should be handling alone. Oliver's heart pounded. Thank you, he whispered, his throat tightening. He hung up and stood there for a moment, the phone trembling in his hand. Anemia? Was there more to it? Why hadn't Mia told him she was leaving? Without thinking, he spun around and rushed back into the living room. Oliver. Lily's voice was soft, concerned. She stood up, sensing his distress. I need to go, he said, his voice strained. But, Lily, I'm sorry, but Mia needs me. I should have been there. I shouldn't have. His voice broke and he didn't finish. Instead, he grabbed his coat, already moving toward the door. Is she okay? Lily asked, her face full of sympathy. I don't know, he admitted, his eyes filled with a mixture of panic and regret. But I need to find out. He didn't wait for her response. He bolted out the door, his mind racing. Oliver's knuckles turned white as he gripped the steering wheel, speeding through the streets toward the hospital. His mind was a whirlwind of memories. Mia's pale face, her tired eyes, the way she'd brushed off his concerns every time he asked if she was okay. Had he missed something? Had she been hiding something from him? He burst into the hospital lobby, his breath ragged. I need to see Mia Adams, he said urgently to the receptionist. The woman gave him a sympathetic look. I'm sorry, sir. She's no longer here. She checked out earlier today. Do you know where she went? He asked, desperation creeping into his voice. The receptionist shook her head. I'm afraid I can't disclose that information. Oliver ran a hand through his hair, pacing. He couldn't lose her. Not like this. He didn't understand at first. He kept calling, each time more desperate than the last. When my phone stayed silent, he reached out to my friends and they stonewalled him, furious on my behalf. He was confused, frustrated, until finally one friend broke. Sarah, do you know where Mia is? His voice cracked with urgency. There was a long pause on the other end before Sarah sighed. Oliver, she went home. She's in our hometown. But, there's something you need to know. His heart stopped. What? Tell me. She doesn't have anemia, Sarah whispered, her voice thick with emotion. She has leukemia. The phone slipped from his hand, clattering to the floor. For a moment the world seemed to tilt. He couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Leukemia, he echoed, barely able to form the word. Yes. She didn't tell you because she didn't want to burden you. She thought your startup was more important, Sarah explained, her voice breaking. Oliver's knees buckled and he leaned against the wall for support. All the times he hadn't been there. All the times he'd dismissed her fatigue, her pale complexion. The weight of his guilt crushed him. I have to go to her, he whispered. Then go, Sarah said gently. But don't just show up. Make it right. He grabbed his phone, thanked her, and ran back to his car. The drive to their hometown felt both agonizingly slow and terrifyingly fast. His thoughts raced with everything he wanted to say, every apology he needed to make. He had failed her. But he wouldn't fail her again. As the town's familiar streets came into view, Oliver's heart pounded in his chest. When I opened the door and saw him standing there, I felt nothing. No anger. No relief. Just exhaustion. Oliver stood there, his eyes hollow with exhaustion and worry. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair a mess from running his hands through it, and there were dark circles under his eyes as if he hadn't slept in days. He looked thinner, worn out. But his eyes, those familiar eyes that once made me feel safe, were now filled with pain and something deeper, regret. My body was weak, I clutched the doorframe, my heart tightening. Oliver. His name slipped from my lips before I could stop it. He didn't move at first, his gaze searching mine. I could see the battle raging inside him, the overwhelming desire to reach for me, to pull me into his arms, and the hesitation that kept him rooted in place. His hands twitched at his sides, his jaw clenched as if he was holding back everything he wanted to say. For a moment we just stood there, the silence stretching between us, thick with unspoken words. His eyes glistened and he opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again, swallowing hard. He started, then stopped, his voice catching. His hands balled into fists, then relaxed, trembling slightly. I could see the weight of his emotions, guilt, sorrow, and a longing so raw it made my chest ache. He exhaled shakily and took a small step forward, his voice quiet but steady. "Mia," he finally said, his voice rough, strained. "I'm here now." Every morning he cooked breakfast, soft foods I could keep down. He wheeled me to a sunny spot in the garden, where the warmth of the sun bathed my frail body. And every evening he brought me a dozen roses, their scent filling the room, a silent apology in every petal. At first I wanted to tell him to leave. I wanted to shout that it was too late. But I didn't have the energy, and maybe deep down I didn't want him to go. I knew I loved him, but I wasn't sure if I still love him. But in the end it doesn't matter. One afternoon, as the sunlight streamed through the window, I placed my hand over his for the first time. His fingers tightened around mine, and for a moment we just sat there in silence. "Take me to the lake shore," I whispered. "The one where we met 10 years ago." He nodded, his eyes shimmering with unspoken emotion. The drive was quiet, the air heavy with unsaid words. When we reached the lake, the water sparkled under the setting sun, just as it had that first day. He laid out a blanket, helping me onto it, and we sat in the gentle breeze. As the sun dipped below the horizon, his voice broke the silence. "Mia, I loved you and I'll always love you. Would you marry me?" I felt something cool slip onto my finger. A ring. But I didn't move. His voice faded, replaced by the gentle song of the waves. "This is the end," I murmured softly, the sunset blurring before my eyes. And then everything was quiet, peaceful.